Welcome to another episode coming at you from chooseyourrelationships.com, author of Love Can't Wait, which can be found on amazon.com. So today I have a special guest, a couple. I know I always say this, but they're hosts of Disrupt the Everyday podcast, Brian and Tanya Hamilton, parents of four. Brian has spent 15 years in the security industry, focusing primarily on healthcare. Tanya spent 12 years working in the social workspace, with her first opportunity working in the shelter for abused women and children. Welcome to the Love Can't Wait podcast. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us.
So, how did, first off, where y'all from?
We are in Brantford, Ontario. Most people won't know where that is, so we'll say we're around an hour from Toronto.
Okay.
The birthplace of Wayne Gretzky and home of Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone. So that's what we're known
Yeah, that's
for.
right. That's right. So, how did the podcast come about? How did y'all get started?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess going back a couple of years, I started a podcast that was, as you mentioned, I spent 15 years in security, and I started a podcast that was focused on healthcare security for a couple of reasons, just to kind of grow myself, just help my career prospects, learn as much as I could, and then share that information with others as well. So I started doing that podcast. I kind of branched out from there to co-host a second podcast with a gentleman named Mike Hodges, where we focus on workplace violence in healthcare. And then I wanted to start a podcast that was just having conversations with people that wasn't related to security. And when I told Tanya about this idea, she knows how much time podcasting already takes up. So she threw out the idea of us hosting it together. And that was kind of where it was founded on. It was just the idea was having these conversations and really just finding information that would help people who are, in similar boat as us, where you have a family and kids, you're trying to balance things. You still want to learn, you still want to be able to grow as a person. So that's where the Disrupt the Everyday podcast was born.
Okay. So I noticed with your podcast, y'all talk about marriage. You talk about being parents. How do you come up with the topics?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because some people do say like you really should crunch down to a niche. I mean, we do have our niche and it's just life in general, especially for our age group, right? And that covers so many different topics. And the majority of the topics we're wanting to learn from too. And we've learned so much, even whether it be the financial conversations we've had to the parenting, to, health overall, all that kind of stuff. So we just try to keep it thinking of people who are in our age category, what they're going through and what they would want to learn as well.
Okay, so how do you? I know y'all have kids. So how do you make time?
Yes. So when we started, it was during one of it feels like many lockdowns that we had. So we had way more time than we currently do because now we're, back into driving the kids to their extracurricular, their sports and all that. So it is a little more hectic now. But we started in a good time where we did like the evenings, once the kids were in bed, we were pretty chill. So it was like, let's be productive, right? Now we did put that legwork in and the learning and all that kind of stuff. So now we do have more time. And the one thing I think for us is we each know our roles. It's like, okay, so you do this and you do this and come back and like, let's make sure it's done. Right. So sometimes a lot of it is done even on our own time, like maybe during my lunch break or, different things like that. So that's pretty much it. Evening and during lunch breaks. I think that's when we can try to fit this stuff in.
And I think the other thing too is I swear by my Outlook calendar. So I put
Mhm.
absolutely everything in there that is of any importance whatsoever. Because if it's important, I think it's important to schedule it just to make sure that you make the time for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of being married, how long have y'all been married?
So we've been married for 14 years, been together for just over 16.
Okay, I'm not. I have a lot of listeners. Some are married, and some are just dating, or they want to eventually get married. I don't talk about marriage a lot, but I'm not against marriage at all because I'm married. so, so I mean, what do you? Well, you know what? I don't know. I think here in where I'm located, I think it's a different. I think the marriage situation is probably a little different, but compared to Canada. So, what do you think about the marriage today, in this day and time?
Well, I think, obviously we, as a society, I think we have a bit of a different view on it. The traditional family isn't as common, I guess, if you will, the traditional kind of nuclear family.
Yeah,
But I guess it really depends. It really depends on the upbringing of the individual, as to what they believe, what they think the focus should be in marriage. You know, I think what we see today is that people are. It's easy for people to cohabitate without being married. So you see, I guess, a lot of reluctance in some cases for people to get married or to even stay married because it's so easy for people to end a marriage as well.
yeah. So, how should I say this? How important do you think the economics plays into being married for the long term?
Hmm. Well, they do say that, um, the finances, right? That is, I think, one of the top five as to why people separate or divorce. So, even just thinking back to like when we first got together, it was money wasn't running, flowing out of our pockets. I can guarantee you that, right? We were
Yeah,
working like two, three jobs at a time. And so then obviously you see that financial stress comes and looks different then, right? So, if one person's wanting to do something and then the other person's wanting to go another way, and finance is an issue, it's going to cause problems. And I was thinking the other day, I'm like, at work, you have strategic planning meetings in the boardroom, right? Like that is something that is so crucial to have in a relationship as well as a marriage. And people think, oh, we don't need to do that, we don't need to have those conversations, but it's so true, you do. And looking at, okay, even if we're lacking, how can we make things work, how can we better our situation, to the point of, okay, we have more than we need right now, how can we make things work, how can we better our situation, right? So it's always having those planning conversations, really.
And I think that part of it too is just being willing to stay the path,
Hmm.
right? It's just like your career. If you stay in a career and you really work on it, you really work on your craft, you really build those skills, you're going to see your value increase. You're going to see your income increase, and I think it's the same with marriage. If you have two people working together and they're working towards a common goal, financially, you're going to see that you're going to reap the benefits of that. And that's where what I kind of alluded to as well when I was talking about people being willing to get out too early. Again, there's a whole financial aspect of that as well, because again, if you just want to break down the economics, we're married. We've been married for 14 years. We live in the same home. We have 4 kids. Now, if our marriage was to come to an end, we'd be paying for 2 different residences. We'd be paying for at least 2 different vehicles because you have to transport kids around. We do have 2 vehicles, but you'd have to both be in a situation where you can drive all those kids around by yourself, right? So you need a large enough vehicle. So the economics of it, you see how it right away, it has a significant impact in that way. Well, just paying for a second residence alone is going to have a huge financial impact. So there is there's a lot of benefits to staying married.
yeah,
Again, but you mentioned financially specifically, but that's when you look at the economics of it, it just makes sense.
yeah. I always say, man, either you're growing or you're dying. If you're
Yeah.
stagnant,
Hmm.
if you're stagnant, you're not moving forward. You're not really growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if even if you're single, I think money is very important because if look if if I didn't have my financial situation in order, I wouldn't be doing this.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Because the reason
Exactly.
why I say that, because if you're like working all the time, let's say you work 2 3 jobs, you don't really have time to think. I
Right.
mean, because you're ripping and running and you're trying to stay afloat. So it's just I think it's a very difficult situation, you know,
Mhm.
and you know, it's hard to sleep at night because you don't know,
Mhm.
especially in these times, because you don't really know what's going to
Oh, for
happen.
sure.
You know, you might go to work the next day. Well, no, well, they might call you now because a lot of people working at home, and I say, hey, we don't need you no more. I'm like, so, but when you know you can do something else or you have more than one income, you your mind is at ease and you have time to think about doing other things. You know?
Mhm. And I mean, when you said if my financial situation wasn't in order, I wouldn't have time for this. I knew exactly what you meant because you would finish your 9 to 5 and then you'd probably have to go somewhere else. And like I
Yeah.
said earlier, we did that. Like when we were first together, and I mean, granted, we didn't have kids at the time. We did do it for a little bit once we had our first, but it was crazy enough then, right? You miss out on a lot of things. You're running, you're passing each other in the wind, literally, right? And I mean, I think it's a growing phase as well, because at that point it was like you're working towards something, you're working towards moving into, even if it's a new rental, you're working towards then saving up for a down payment. There is that stage in life, and that's fine. But it's if like that stage has been going on for the last 5 years, right? Like we want to grow, but then you also want to stay within your means, and that's a big
Yeah.
one too. It's different if you're working to better, but then it's different if you have to work 3 jobs to just keep up with the lifestyle that you're living, right?
Yeah. So, do y'all get questions from married couples, like
Oh,
emails?
not as often. Even just like our social circle, I know people usually ask us questions or personal, like, personal things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying the other day when we were doing an interview that, maybe it's just from my social work background, but a lot of friends will sometimes come and just say, hey, what do you think about this situation, right? Or what should I do then? And they know that Brian and I are very open. For the most part, what you see is
Yeah.
what you get, whether we're at home by ourselves or whether we're like in a group with people. If we're upset with each other, we're going to be upset. you
Yeah.
know
So,
if Yeah.
so what are your friends and family? What do they think about your podcast? What do they think?
They've been pretty supportive, I would say. I'm surprised at how many of them actually listen to it. Or like I said, I did a podcast before I started this one with Tanya for a year and a half, and I know a lot of my friends and family didn't really listen to it because it was very niche.
Hmm.
So when we run into them and they say something about something they heard on the show, and I'm like, okay, they're actually listening, right? So
Yeah.
so I guess, yeah, we have a lot of people who have been supportive within our circle, and people who've just found our show other ways and have we've built relationships with. But yeah, the people close to us have been, for the most part, listening to our show, which is always encouraging.
Hmm. And even some of the conversations that we've had and people who we've had on the show, you know there's been friends or family in the back of my mind that it's like, oh, this is total, like, I hope they listen to this because this really resonates with them and their situation, right? So sometimes even in planning, it's like, okay, I know that this could benefit at least one person.
Yeah. I know my friends and family, they think my podcast is hilarious. They listen to it and they'll be like, "Ah, he doesn't mean that." you know? Yeah, they don't really take it serious. They like, "Oh, you don't mean that. You don't take that serious." you know. But yeah, that's how they feel. Yeah. So what do y'all think? Just based on your I guess perspective, what has been some keys to being married for so long? Y'all been married longer than me. I'm 10 years in. So
Okay, not too far.
yeah.
I think we laugh a lot. We really do. That's big. Whether it's just like something silly that Brian would literally text me that he's seen like on social media and he's like sitting in the next room, to just jokes that we're dealing with on a regular basis. So I think that's number one. not too serious. So then that helps with the whole, if you get frustrated with each other, it doesn't end up lasting as long as maybe it could, right? Just being open enough and vulnerable enough to share like what it is he wants to do and what it is I want to do. And knowing that either way, if he succeeds, I succeed. Like it's definitely a partnership. It's not a competition of, okay, you got that job. Now I'm going to go and try to get this job. Like, your role, what you're supposed to be doing, you stay doing your thing. And like I said, he succeeds, I succeed. It's all good. Right.
And in communication, like we could obviously, I think, communicate even better than we do, but I think we do a pretty good job of communicating, and that's super important. Again, just for everything that Tanya mentioned, like that doesn't work without the communication being present.
Yeah, I think today, man, a lot of people don't know their roles. It's like they're confused. Women are confused and the guys are confused, and you just have a ball of confusion together.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, right? Because it's not even like the whole, this is your womanly role, this is your manly role. It's not even that per se, right?
No.
It's the, okay, I know that Brian's better at, finances and that kind of stuff and investing. So that's your thing, you run with it. I'm good at looking up if we need something done around the house or things like that. Like I have extra time in my day, so I can look up those people, get 3 quotes, get the job done. He doesn't have to worry about it. Just different things like that to just make each other's lives a little bit more easy, right? Instead of coming back and being like, oh, I mean, please, granted, there are times when he'll be like, oh, did you get that done? I'm like, oh yeah, no, totally forgot. Right. I am a procrastinator. So, but at the end of the day, we each know that things are going to get done and who's going to do it.
Yeah. So where do y'all see the podcast going? Are you going to have more, I guess, more of the same topics that y'all have now, or what?
Yeah, we're open to many. It's interesting. We did October and November, like the beginning of November, we were doing a lot of interviews. It was almost like daily. And then all of a sudden, like the sports picked up for the kids again, all their like programs. And I was like, oh my gosh, this actually not enjoyable, right? Because it's now becoming a stress of like, okay, we got to go drop him off and then we got to be back in time for this. That's not cool, right?
Yeah.
So we did do a lot, and we've had great conversations like all over the place, from like an MMA fighter all the way down to like a couple who talks about parenting and loss, right? Like we're all over the place, but we know that everybody can benefit. And even if maybe somebody doesn't think a topic is all that important, they can definitely pass it on to somebody else.
And at the very least, you're going to learn something from listening to the conversation, or at least get, some kind of enjoyment out of it. So that's kind of the goal there. Even if it's not something that's specific to you, you're going to be able to learn something by listening, and hopefully there's something that you can apply to your daily life.
For sure.
Yeah, I like it. I think you're the only, well, I mean, there's some couples, but I think you guys, y'all have a very unique way of, just of doing things, because, there's some couples out here, but they're not as consistent, I would say.
Yeah, that's one thing. Like, and that's Brian, right? Like, from what he's done in his experience, it's like, okay, consistency is key. Like it's every week. It doesn't matter. And because I was saying, well, do we need to have all these interviews done? He's like, but yeah, you don't want to, like, you want to enjoy Christmas holidays and things like that. You still want to be able to produce something, right? Because consistency. And then that's also, people think, oh, well, if they miss this and they miss that, then no, they're not really serious about it, right? It's just like a job. It's just like anything. If you say you're going to do it, you got to do it. So
yeah, because some days, even though I schedule ahead of time, but on some days I might not feel like talking.
Yeah,
but it happens,
Yeah.
but I still push through it,
Yeah.
Yeah. So if people wanted to follow you, where would they go?
Sure. So we are on Instagram at disrupt the everyday, disrupt underscore the everyday. We have our website, disrupttheeveryday.com, and Facebook page and Facebook group, the same thing. LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn. Both of us have our own personal LinkedIn accounts, and we have a Disrupt the Everyday LinkedIn page. I'm really easy to find. It's Brian, Brine Hamilton. So I don't know that there's any other Brian out there. I haven't run into any. So I'm super easy to find. Also, if you happen to be interested in healthcare security, if you go to brianhamilton.com, there's lots of resources there as well.
There you have it. Like, share this episode. All links will be found in the show notes. Tell me what you think below. Until next time, we out. Peace.